We're very lucky when we come to work across Washington Square in the morning. We get to look at the very best surviving Greek Revival row houses in the United States. Those are the red brick-fronted, wide and deep houses that sit on the north of the square on the eastern quarter. They were built in the early 1830s for a group of New York City's first affluent merchants of the port. They came up here to build houses to be amongst themselves, as these people were businessmen, and many of them of a Scottish background. They did not adhere to the tenets of the Church of England, the Episcopal Church in America. And as a result, once here and once among their peers, they decided their children had to go to a school that didn't uphold the Church of England, its clergy, or its legal system. They wanted their own school, and so they founded here on the northeast corner of Washington Square their own college, the University of the City of New York, with absolutely no budget, a Gothic building built by prisoners at Sing Sing as rehabilitation exercises, and a willingness to allow business as a major and a detachment from religious affiliation. And so NYU, as it later became known, and the Row grew up together as the first upper part of the city, a part of the city so far above the port where the merchants made their money that it actually required a stagecoach trip up Broadway to reach home and to reach the school at night. In the 1890s, the University of the City of New York faced a crisis. Washington Square had changed. True, the widows of the men who'd built the Row were still living in their houses. Their children had married. They'd moved up to Fifth Avenue. Washington Square was now part of a much larger city far to the north, where the red cows had once lived when the people moved into the Row. It was a backwater. It was forgotten. And on our eastern quadrant, the publishing and textile worlds was invading with taller, commercial loft buildings. And those buildings came closer and closer. The president of NYU was concerned about the commercial nature of the area, and he hired young Stanford White to design one of the most glorious campuses ever built in the United States, the University Heights campus of what would now be called NYU. Stanford White designed a beautiful library endowed, just as it was being completed by the Gould daughter, with 8 Connemara marble columns of huge proportion, and a beautiful hall of fame where you could walk around surrounded by the great learned figures of history. The university abandoned its own home for a perfect campus in the perfect countryside 10 miles above Washington Square. The artists of Stanford White's world still might live around Washington Square, but the commissions they were doing were for the bigger city above us in a range that went as far as University Heights. In what is one of the most amazing turnarounds in the history of university locations, in the 1920s, the American Book Company, which had had a textbook storage and publications building by Mr. Zucker right here at 100 Washington Square, went into bankruptcy. And in what is surely one of the funniest aspects of university history within the country, NYU came back to its original site. It's about the only campus that ever did it. They left the Bronx, came back to Washington Square, well, not fully until much later, but starting in the 1920s, Washington Square College was begun here, and the university returned to its original site.